Hi, welcome to LA Meekly. Thanks for clicking buttons. And now our voices happen.
Keep on clicking.
Keep on clicking. That's what you're good at.
Don't stop. Delete this and then re-download it. It sounds better the second time. It's like a cup of tea.
How about you download like 400 episodes of this and then just see which one sounds better or different.
And also get all your friends in Russia to do the same. So we're here, a little bonus today to introduce what we have here, which is a discussion with an author at the Mystic Museum we did.
It was a lot of fun. We got to hang out in the haunted parlor.
Yeah.
You've heard the interview with
the Mystic Museum, the people themselves. The reason we were there was to host this discussion with Craig Owens. He's an author. He's a photographer. He's a child. He's a lover. He's a paranormal investigator of sorts.
Yeah, he's more of a paranormal researcher, but he might be a ghost. We never figured that out.
That was the one question we didn't ask.
We said, "Is Craig Owens here yet?" And they're like, "Oh, he's been dead for 10 years." So we had a good time with him at the Mystic Museum, which is again why we were there.
And the name of his book
is Haunted by History, which we
Volume
have
1.
Volume 1. Volume 2 seems to be coming out soon. You can get the copy of that on Amazon. You'll be able to catch him May 5th if you like. It's something called a Ghost Hunt with Ghostwatch Paranormal at the Aztec Hotel, which is fantastic. I believe it's in
Fantastic. That's downtown. No, that's the Mayan. I'm thinking of as downtown.
Aztec Hotel, which is in Monrovia. It's a very haunted place. They're going to be having like an investigation done by the Ghostwatch Paranormal guys, and then a discussion with Craig and everything. Tickets are $45 to get in, but you want to go in because it's not open to the public. So this would be your chance to see the Aztec Hotel. Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've been to an Aztec hotel before.
Mayans, I get it. I read a book about the Aztecs.
I'd rather go to the Olmec Inn. You can also follow Craig on
Instagram.
All sorts of things.
It's bizarre_Los_Angeles. Bizarre Los Angeles is the site he runs. It's a really great blog, and you can also find him on Facebook under Bizarre Los Angeles too.
You can follow us if you want to on Instagram, LA_Meekly, Twitter at LA Meekly, Facebook LA Meekly,
Tumblr, lameekly.tumblr.com. You can email us.
Email us with any comments, questions, suggestions, requests for field trip episodes. We have a new segment of our show, which is going to be starting our new episode where we're taking questions from our fans and we'll answer them in an episode. Yeah. So you can email us la.meekly@gmail.com or any way you want to find us. Also, hey, subscribe to us on iTunes. Here's the thing. If you listen to us but you aren't subscribed to us yet, do it. Sorry, did I not put that gently enough? Do that, because that way it's easier for you. Like whenever something like this, which is a bonus thing and isn't just first of the month, you won't have to check first of the month. This will come to you automatically. And also it helps us to be more visible online. So it helps keep this going towards a greater future.
No, what are you trying to sell me on? I subscribe already.
Eugenics. Yeah, so subscribe to us if you don't already. If you do already, leave us a review on iTunes or
a star rating.
Or anywhere you listen to podcasts. That would be great.
If you see us in the street, be nice to us.
Leave a review if you see us in the street.
If you see us
denim, 2 stars.
Height denim, no thank you.
That's how you can find us and contact us. And
if you die, let Craig Owens know.
Yeah, please contact him on Ghost Craig. Instagram. Enjoy this talk at the Mystic Museum with Craig Owens. Spooky, spooky, boo. Those are the magic words to get in.
Oh, is that why they didn't let me in?
Say it. That's dumb when you say it.
Nah, I said boob. Damn it.
Don't give him your microphone.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I speak for everybody when I say you're welcome.
Yes.
I want to ask you something that's been on my mind for a while, because we've talked casually before. You seem to, just like the book, you're like a man of many hats. Like you're a photographer, you're a historian, you're a writer. What's the main thing that all the other stuff hangs off of?
Well, that's a hard one to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I would say basically how this project started out is that I went to a hotel, it was the Mission Inn, and I was shooting something completely different than what turned out to be a book. But it was a vintage-inspired shoot. And I had heard that it was haunted, and so I was curious about it, but I wasn't necessarily there to ghost hunt. And this was in 2009. It was August, 110 degrees outside. There were more staff in that hotel than there were guests. I mean, there was just nobody there.
Ideal.
We went like a whole day, and I hired one model. She had the room directly below me, and we just gathered up a bunch of vintage clothes. And it was going to be for another website project that I had in mind that had more of an old Hollywood theme than a paranormal theme. So I picked a room that I didn't even think was haunted. Never heard anything about it. It's called the Carrie Jacobs Bond Suite. Didn't know anything about the room, really, except they now call it one of the presidential suites. It's a pretentious name since no president's ever stayed there.
But they could.
It was originally part of Author's Row. At least Carrie Jacobs Bond was an author and songwriter. But now they call it Presidential Row and Presidential Suite. So I took one of these. I'd never stayed in one of the expensive suites before. So because it was 2009, the hotel was out of season, I thought, hey, it's fine. I looked into the hotel photography policies. They allowed me to come in and shoot. So the model stayed right below me. Sure enough, we shot till like 4 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I just collapsed on the bed. I mean, we had driven from LA to Riverside, had dinner, immediately started shooting. And by 4 in the morning, I didn't even bother to undress. I just plopped on the bed. I was out, 9 in the morning, I get up, I have to square things with the bank, I'm running errands. I come back at noon, it's already 110 degrees outside. That's
Riverside.
Why I remember. Yeah. And I walk into my suite. It's not really a suite, it's just a very fancy room with a loft and stairs that go up to the loft.
Sweet.
Yes.
Like that I did that?
That's a good time. Yeah, it was a sweet room, not a suite. So I go in there and I hear something being moved around in the bathroom. So I immediately thought, hey, this is housekeeping's here. So I call out because I don't want to be rude. No one answers. I go into the bathroom thinking, well, who's here?
I'm going to kill this person.
So I just, I thought, well, okay, it's hot, yeah. 110 degrees, I'll let this one go.
I might be passing out, I don't know what's happening.
The model still is asleep, I still had things I could be doing with my time, so I get on the computer and I'm sending and answering emails, and downstairs, and then I start hearing the sound of like coins dropping one by one on like a wood table. And I'm still trying to ignore it. I'm
room
like
service.
Typing. I'm hearing something weird, but then I heard the click clack of women's heels up in that tiled loft floor, and they're heading from around that table area because there was a table up there in the loft to the stairs that were about to come down to me, and I literally, said. I don't know who I was writing this to, but I immediately said, I think I've got a ghost in my room. I got to go check it out. Bye. Click. Send. So I'm like scrambling. First of all, I close all the windows after checking outside to make sure no one's around, like pranking me.
Yeah.
And then I grab a couple of audio recorders that I carried but had never used for EVP work. And I went upstairs to the loft and I conducted like a 10-minute question answer. And I'll be honest with you, I felt like a total schmuck. I'm talking to nothing but air.
Light fixtures? How long have you been here?
I am asking questions to nothing. A void, okay? And so after 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm listening very intently because I'm listening for sounds outside. I'm listening, I've never done this before, so I think all my senses were really amped, And I knew I was doing everything right, no sounds. I go back to play back the audio. There is a voice, very faint, and I couldn't make it out what it was said, but it sounded female. Well, once I got my first EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, I started playing it for everyone who'd listen. Front desk clerk,
pull over.
The model itself, herself, and I immediately I didn't have headphones because again I wasn't there to ghost hunt.
Yeah, it was 2009. No one had.
Didn't have equipment, so I went to Radio Shack, bought headphones.
2009.
Yes, 2009 headphones. And I could make it out even clearer that it definitely was what originally from the original speakers, it just sounded like a woman's voice. In headphones, it was a woman's voice.
Was the voice saying anything?
I still couldn't make it out because it was very faint. So, meanwhile, once the model had come upstairs around 2, and I said, "You got to hear this. You got to hear this." And she listened to it and said, "I hear it." And said, "By the way, why were you moving furniture around at 5 in the morning?" And I went, "What?" And she said that she had just was on the brink of falling asleep when suddenly, right up above her, and she's directly below me, mind you, she started hearing really heavy furniture being moved across about just like
just
that.
heard.
Just like that.
I think you might be followed.
And I said, "Well, no." And we tested the furniture, the sofas and stuff. I mean, if you ever tried to move hotel furniture, it's like they load it up.
Yeah, it's.
I try to
sand.
I try to take everything out of a hotel when I leave.
Super heavy. Right.
I don't know what that means.
Did I tell you that they're LA Meekly?
I mentioned that we're Peabody and Sherman already.
And LA thievery.
So anyway, what I ended up doing is I went downstairs to the front desk and I had to tell her that story too. And her reaction was very interesting. The Mission Inn has a policy not to discuss ghosts. I should warn you. Their docents are like, that's one of 101 docenting at the Mission Inn. Never discuss ghosts.
Only tangible things.
Just smile and use,
and cry.
Words. or outright deny it.
Yeah, it's good policy.
And there's a reason for that, and maybe if we have time, I'll even get to that. But anyway, I played it to the front desk clerk, and she said, "Well, that's very interesting." She said, "Now, were you moving furniture?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, that's good to know because you're the third person that's told me this story since I've been working here."
Ghosts.
With that exact same room.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yes." And I was always afraid to call up into the Carrie Jacobs Bond suite at 5 in the morning. Are you moving furniture over there?
If you're
because
a ghost,
if they say no, why, you have to explain.
Yeah.
And then it gets
Break
really
the rule.
bad.
For no reason. Good night.
It get really bad.
I just want to see if you could.
So I'll be honest with you at that point, and this is a long answer to a short question, but at that point I ceased to be really interested about the photo shoot.
Yeah.
I became totally hooked on when's the next ghost thing going to happen, what's going to happen next. I became and you could get Mission Inn employees to talk about the hauntings off the record. You can always do that, and they will talk because there are so many stories and so many things that happen. We were shooting. There's a picture in the book of a woman in a red dress standing at the door to the chapel. And what was funny is I'm in the shadows, and we're shooting this at like 2:30 at night or in the morning.
Close to the witching hour. You can't do that.
And suddenly, this security officer runs around the corner and nearly collides with me. Well, he jumped out of his skin when he saw me with the camera out. And he immediately asked to see our key cards, and I showed him the key cards. So, because as long as you are staying there, you can shoot.
Ghosts don't have key cards, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Notorious.
Well, that was just it. That's what he told me, is he said, you scared the crap out of me because I thought I had seen a ghost.
Which don't exist in this hotel.
Right. Well, that's right.
Yeah.
He said that, but it was the lady in red, not necessarily me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's scary.
At the doorway. And he said, I was running down to check it out, and I was about to radio it in. And it's true, he had his radio up like this when he jumped and almost dropped.
Who are you going to radio?
And I asked him, I said, well, have you ever seen a ghost here? And he said, well, no, I haven't. I've only been here for 2 months, but all the security guards have told me so many things, I just know it's a matter of time before I see it. So, sure enough, on my last day at the Mission Inn, I saw my first ghost. And it was quite by accident. And it was during a break in shooting, and it was a shadow figure, okay? I didn't believe in shadow figures at that time. I was thought I knew a lot about the paranormal. just from watching the shows and reading parapsychology books as a kid and all that sort of stuff. And it fooled me. I actually thought it was a shadow. It wasn't like I imagined the shadow. The shadow was there. It looked like it was peeking around the corner. Something, what had made me notice the shadow is as I was walking across the courtyard into the Alhambra Mirador suite, some movement caught my eye. So I'm like looking down this open mouth tunnel, and that leads directly into the hotel. And nothing seemed unusual except that shadow. And so I bypassed it because mentally I matrixed, that's a shadow. Nothing to be alarmed. So going through a second time, looking over every detail, I landed back on that shadow again, and I started asking, what is producing that shadow? Where's the light source? I'm not asking out loud.
Yeah.
I'm not asking the shadow.
The shadow knows.
But suddenly, exactly. Suddenly that shadow just whipped around the corner super fast. And I was like a deer in headlight.
Yeah.
Okay? I was a deer in headlight. And so for about 1-2 seconds I was like going. So I
like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, like little rascals, you know. If I'd had one of those little hats with the propeller, that's the moment when the propeller would spin off its axis. So I went and I said, well, I better check it out. So I go around that alcove where it disappeared, and it only went to 2 rooms. Okay, one room to the left was a room that I later found out was supposed to be very haunted. It often gets misinterpreted or mistakenly referred to as the honeymoon suite because
no
the
one's
first
ever had a
recorded
honeymoon
ghost
in
story
there.
had to do with the husband and bride staying there. You'll know it because it has a metal spiral staircase that goes from the first floor to the second floor. The second room, door to the second room, was the room I was going to be sleeping in that night.
I guess my car's kind of comfortable.
I went back in and finished the shoot. It was a horrible night.
Yeah, it must
we
have
heard
been.
footsteps overhead the entire time. There wasn't even a floor ahead of us, but we were hearing footsteps overhead.
What?
And it sounded like someone was throwing like something really heavy on the Spanish tile on the roof. So I'd go out and look around. We tried to catch it on recorders, but by the time we thought of that, it had kind of stopped or it had slowed down. So and then the next morning I woke up at 7 in the morning to a loud door slam. And so I was immediately up, dressed, checked out. I asked who else was up there that night, was told that I was the only guest that night. I told them about the door slam. They checked all their records. None of their employees had entered any of the rooms upstairs on the 4th floor that morning because they would have a record.
Yeah.
Because everyone uses the key card.
Oh boy.
So where that door slam came, I don't know. It was a great unwelcome wake-up call. And I went home and I called everybody I knew, sent emails off. What is a shadow person? What is really a shadow person? And I got all kinds of crazy responses, from Indian tribal spirits to an out-of-the-body experience from someone living, aliens from another
my
planet,
favorite.
people from the future that are time traveling to the past.
Aliens from the future.
Or some dark demonic thing. Well, I didn't feel it was dark or demonic.
Yeah.
It was just peeking around a corner of me and it just whipped around and disappeared. So the best I could come up with, best explanation, is that it is, in fact, a ghost. Shadow people are ghosts. And that ghosts have different levels of manifestation. The best one being full body, where you can touch them literally. They assume mass, and you cannot see through them. Probably the lowest form of manifestation is a mist or a smoke. But the shadow is a level up from the mist and smoke. It's kind of somewhat shapeless, it hasn't fully assumed the look of a human, although it may be somewhat human-like. The shadow I saw, and which is very common among people that have seen shadow people, is that it's very dark, it's two-dimensional, it's blacker than black, okay? This one was darker than the other shadows in that hallway. And it looks like it's wearing a cowl. And the cowl is the key word. It's not
Could be
literally
Batman.
wearing a cowl. Well, it could be.
Anything could.
But, and being that the Mission Inn and, you know, Frank Miller, the person that built the Mission Inn, was supposedly,
It is Batman.
used to wear a friars
Okay.
thing on weekends.
Yeah.
Or special holidays, especially Christmas when he was alive. He died in 1935.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, again, but people have seen cowled shadow people in other locations
Mhm.
all around the world. So, I mean, not everyone can be, you know, a building owner that just happened to dress at Christmas time. So maybe it's just a low level, it's trying to form
Uh-huh.
in some way, and so it's kind of blocky, so it gets mistaken as a cowled figure.
I see.
Then as it, you know, progresses, it can be semi-transparent, it starts taking on more features, and it just depends on, you know, what energy it's drawing upon and how much it really wants to manifest.
Okay.
That's the best explanation I could come up with, a shadow person. It's the only one that makes sense to me. But I'm a person that tries to use common sense and critical thinking skills
Yeah.
in trying to determine everything. I question everything, so especially when it comes to the paranormal.
Yeah,
Okay.
you are very skeptical sometimes. I could hear you talk and you're like, nah, I don't know, I don't believe that. You also, one of my favorite things that you do is you will track a ghost story to the root and be like, this is why it started. You're very good at that, yeah.
Yeah, well, now we're getting back to the question again. The answer to that long question is that after that experience, that changed me. But I started to question what is really haunting the Mission Inn. Because you're not going to get it from the Dawsons. You're not going to get it from, you know, you're getting piecemeal answers from various people that have pieces to this puzzle. But when did the ghost story start? What was the Carrie Jacob Bond room before it became a presidential suite? You know, where did Frank Miller live and die? Where did, you know, these supposed ghosts? So I started going back and researching and researching and researching. And the answers, it was like one rabbit hole led to another rabbit hole to another rabbit hole. Well, I can answer the question about Carrie Jacobs' Bond Suite.
Mhm.
It was completed not as a suite for people to live in, but it was 1929 when it opened, and it was a ladies' recreation hall, which is why I caught a woman's voice
Oh,
upstairs.
that makes sense.
They would hold occasional weddings up there. And when Frank Miller got his big award from the Emperor of Japan, the Emperor didn't show up for it, but he sent nephew of a nephew of a nephew, who, you know, and someone from L.A., you know, from the consul, to bestow the award on him.
Why wouldn't the Emperor of Japan want to come to Riverside?
So it was used as something other than a guest room. It became a guest room probably when it reopened around 1992. Okay, so up until that time, it was just a social hall where it was primarily open for women. And if you look at, there is an old picture of the way the Carrie Jacobs Bond room used to look back in the 30s, and there's no beds. I mean, it is a really nice, quaint meeting ground.
Yeah.
Now let's get back to the EVP that I caught. Once I got home, I could hear it better, so I started like literally listening to it, and it was a woman that sounded like she was responding to me. It's very faint, but I could make out when I asked the question. Asked a question, was like, "Can you come closer to me so we could talk?" This woman immediately said, "Sure, I would love that."
How polite.
And then she said something I couldn't understand, and then she ended with this forlorn, "I want to go home." And that broke my heart.
Yeah.
That's what I thought I heard. That broke my
It can't
heart
be that.
And so I became curious. Then I went to the Pier Pond Inn in Ventura. Same thing happened. Not exactly the same thing, but there were footsteps at night in this building that no one had access to except me. I had placed a recorder on the fireplace that night, and we did get voices. during some of our EVP sessions, again, I was doing a vintage style photo shoot for this other project I had in mind. So I started asking questions about, why is this place haunted? And I got a wide variety of different answers. So I thought, well, let's go to the source of it. Let's go back to the archives and let's find out exactly who lived and died there, and stop relying on hearsay or what was published in other paranormal books.
Right.
So I wanted to find out when these ghost stories went public, who started them, and how had they changed. And I was shocked. The answers are shocking. For instance, I did the prelude that the Mission Inn doesn't like to talk about ghosts. Well, that's kind of the new policy, and as much as they love to talk about how they embrace the old and that's the one thing they aren't. That hotel opened in 1904. By 1908, it had its first ghost story.
Wow, that quick?
And everyone was talking about the catacombs being haunted. Those are the underground tunnels.
Oh, and the archways.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
They're structurally unsafe, so they say. So that keeps a lot of rookie-loos from getting in there, and also stopped them from doing their Halloween tour. But guess what? Those things were being constructed around 1910, 1911. It was already haunted before they were even completed. Did you know that? The catacombs. And they had a name for the ghost, even.
Really?
If you look into the Riverside newspapers, they called it the Glenwood Ghost. And the reason why it was called the Glenwood Ghost was because the Mission Inn originally started as the Glenwood Cottage. Then it became the Glenwood Hotel, the Glenwood Tavern. Then when they tore most of that stuff down to build the Mission Inn, from its inception in, I want to say 1904, it could have been a little earlier, but 1904 to about 1919, it was called the Glenwood Mission Inn, until they finally decided, enough of this Glenwood stuff. So in 1910, it was called the Glenwood Ghost. And there is a suicide that happened there of a prominent person that worked the staff and was the owner's right-hand person. And it was a very weird, he left a pseudo-suicide note. It doesn't really say, I've decided to end it. Yeah. It's just a note saying, give all my belongings to such and such, such and such. No one really understands why this person committed suicide. He had wanted to be buried on the Mission Inn grounds, but he had no money for any of that. Well, the owners weren't going to allow that.
Yeah.
But because he was a close friend of the families, they sent him to LA to be cremated, and then they interred his ashes in their family plot in Riverside. Not a year after that suicide, the first ghost story started to appear. And so I discuss all of that in the book, and names and details of this person's life. The Dawsons don't really like to talk about that, but even the family got into it. The Miller family, Alice Miller, his sister, was big into spiritualism. She would have seances. Frank Miller ran the entertainment across the street at the Loring Theater. He would book spiritualists to entertain there. They didn't have an issue with spiritualism. They didn't have an issue with promoting their ghosts. There's one story that made the newspapers about one of the relatives. They showed up they had some kind of staff party for employees at the Mission Inn. He shows up dressed as a ghost, wearing a white robe.
Oh my God.
He's obviously playing off on the ghost legend. True. Because the way the article read is that he scared everyone away once he came in dressed as a ghost. So yeah, the reason why the Mission Inn doesn't do that has to do with the new owners, okay? The new owners, I guess they became, from what I understand from a family member, I don't write about this because it's hearsay, these are kind of tough questions to ask an owner if you get hold of them.
Are you sitting down?
You're a born again Christian, and that's why you don't allow ghosts. I don't think those kind of questions, fly really well. But But they also wanted to emphasize more of the history thing. But I'll tell you, as much as they want to deny that it's haunted, stories happen all the time there. And you go around Riverside, you'll find some waiter that said, oh yeah, I did an event there. Yeah, this tray like flew across the floor and crashed against the wall, spilling all these drinks and stuff. And there used to, and when the Mission Inn went into deep decline, and they were fighting to literally save the building, the rumor going around town was the only one that was holding up the Mission Inn walls was the ghost of Frank Miller, the owner. And I do believe he is one of the ghosts. Strangely enough, he died in one of the rooms. The hotel, it's on the 4th floor. That's where the family lived and died, on the 4th floor. And it's that 4th floor that's really active, okay? Every time I've gone there, something has happened. And that Carrie Jacobs Bond suite is a haunted suite. I went there back again to do the photo shoot there. We caught EVPs there again the second time. So it is an active suite. That whole 4th floor is active. I even found out through my research that other people had seen a ghost in the same hallway that I had seen mine. Or that people had heard footsteps overhead when there isn't another floor. Once I found out that I'm not alone in experiencing this stuff, I started to believe myself a little more.
You cut yourself some slack?
I was really doubting. I mean, really, when paranormal activity happens, and Eric, you've had some experiences here. Your first thought is, I'm crazy. Usually, you start thinking I'm crazy, and then after a while, awesome. Well, that comes later. But those first few times, you're like going, wait, I laid this wrench here. Why is it stuck in the door? 15 minutes later, or
first majors.
Yeah, this
is Eric, everybody.
We haven't met him. He's one of the proprietors.
Hello, my name's Eric. My first separate experience by myself here was so realistic, I actually thought we were being broken into and being robbed at the time. So yeah, you're right. I thought I was crazy. I ran for a bat. I ran for the phone. I had 911 ready to dial. But before I did that, because in Burbank, if you call 911 and it's false, not false, but they deem it to be a false alarm, they charge you. Oof. So what you think is a free service, the police department is not. So I called Kiko, the other owner, and I asked her to check on her phone because I was too afraid to go on the side where all the computers were set up and see if any of the doors had been open, because you could see with the alarm system what time doors had. And she said nothing was open, and I was like, somebody's in here with me. Freaked me out. So ever since then, I think just a couple days ago was the first time I spent the night here alone. Like I was here till like 2 a.m. working on stuff, and it literally took about 6 months before I was like, okay, now I feel comfortable being by myself. So.
Did you do that thing where you ran through the entire place, turning all the lights on? Thank you both.
They were already on. It was when we were remodeling, getting this place ready to open. That half was already open, and it had plastic covering these walkways between one side and the other side. And when I was ready to leave, I turned off my extremely loud music I was listening to at the time, and as soon as I shut it off, I just heard footsteps, like running from one side to the other side, but on the opposite side that I was on.
Yeah.
It was so realistic, I thought somebody was here, and it completely freaked me out. So that's one of them. Stephanie and Kiko, they've had plenty of experiences where they've actually seen full-on apparitions and shadow figures. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think what would happen to me was one of the apparitions that Kiko saw. We believe that through psychic mediums and friends of ours who came in here and actually had the same story of the same person. Like they all said, no, it's this little girl, she's here, there's also this guy here, and there's also this other lady here. They all said the same thing without knowing each other. So we believe it's this little girl that likes Kiko and Stephanie, but likes to mess with me. So I'm like, I probably won't stay here that late by myself.
Most people are that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens.
So we'll get to the next question, or comment. But the point is as I started to focus more on the book, I think that the only real way to understand the nature of the hauntings is to actually have a very strong foundation of what the history was, what the social history of that place. How did it fit within the society? What was the purpose of building the hotels? There was a different purpose back then as opposed to now, where you just build a Motel 8 for the sake of building a Motel 8, and your statistics tell the corporate office that this is the place to build a Motel 8, or an Econo Lodge. And they built hotels now, not every hotel, because there are still some luxury hotels being constructed in parts of the world, but the vast majority of hotels have no desire for you to stay there all day long. They want, they understand you're here to sightsee, you're here to go to other places, so they just give you a bed, room, few amenities, maybe a bagel and lox and cereal in the morning, and then you're on your own. Back then, though, it was different. The Hotel del Coronado was built, and it still has maintained that, where you really don't want to leave, and everything's there for you during your stay there. Same thing with the Mission Inn. Good luck trying to see anything as interesting as the Mission Inn. You might as well just stay there, and they know that, and so they try to cater to those every needs. The Julian Gold Rush Hotel was built in Julian, California, just because all the old hotels were ratty, and they felt that this was a good place and a good time to build a new hotel. But a lot of people didn't just stay there for a night or 2 nights or for the weekend. Some of them chose to live there at those hotels back then. Alexandria Hotel, downtown Los Angeles, was opened in 1906. It was the first, they built that with the intention of making it the first 5-star hotel Los Angeles really ever had. Up until that time, they would have nice hotels, but even it's as typical today as it was then. These big splashy things would happen and then go out of fashion. The next big thing, this one has a working elevator. New. 5 years later, who wants to ride that elevator? There's something new.
Stairs are back in.
So the Alexandria was literally built to be a hotel where people stayed and wanted to stay. It was deliberately built on the edge of the new emerging financial district, because all these miners, all this new money was coming into Los Angeles. So they needed a hotel that reflected the city. Because you've got to remember, Los Angeles back then was smaller than Detroit. It wasn't, it may have been breaking the top 10 biggest cities in the U.S., at the turn of the 20th century. It was definitely booming, and no one could really keep track of all the people flooding in there for their health. It was a major place because all the gold booms that were going on in Nevada. Where do you think the meetings were being held? They weren't being held in Nevada. The goldfield people were coming to the Alexandria to find speculators to invest on the exchange in LA, because it was closer than San Francisco, which was the next big place to invest out in the West. Otherwise, you had to go to Chicago, or you had to go back to New York to do it. So that's why LA was growing, is the speculators were coming into town, and the weather and the clean health. And by 1910, the movie colony started to come here from New Jersey. Biograph films, D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, Jack Pickford, Max Sennett, they all came over for a winter in 1910. And they loved it, so they decided to come back every winter. Well, D.W. Griffith did. Max Sennett took one visit before he decided he'd break away and move his Keystone over here. So there's a reason why these hotels flourished. There's a reason why these hotels were built. And so they offer a very different history than, say, today's hotels.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's your question.
You were talking about the Alexandria where you stayed, and that's an entry in your book as well. That's one of the places where I believe Houdini's wife, after he passed, was starting to have seances for him.
She did the seances at the
Knickerbocker.
Thank you, audience.
Hollywood Knickerbocker Hotel. Now, Houdini had he had a relationship with the Alexandria Hotel. He was there in 1919. And when he would come to LA, which wasn't very often, he would either stay with friends or he would stay at the Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
The Hollywood Roosevelt is a weird location because, for one thing, it didn't open until 1929. It had been built in 1926, but it had been an empty building. The builders that had built the original building had gotten into a big litigation. They ran out of money, they started suing one another. So it just remained an empty building. So all the talk about Valentino riding down from the hills, it's all hogwash. Okay?
That's my favorite one.
I know, Valentino never set foot in the Knickerbocker Hotel. It didn't become the Knickerbocker Hotel and actually a functional building until 1929. Again, these are the falsehoods that I had to go and investigate because they get repeated. It's on E! Entertainment. It's on. It's everywhere.
If it's on E, it's true.
And the conservative, everyone gets the history so wrong.
Yeah,
it's easier
But
that way.
It's often hiding in plain sight if you just look, but no one's looking. So until I did, I got into this big discussion with Richard Carradine of Ghost Hunters of Urban Los Angeles about this because he will lead tours and he takes them to the Hollywood Knickerbocker. He says, Valentino, I said, can you please stop that? That ghost story originated in 1994. It was started by a guy named Max Fisher who ran the All-Star Cafe out of that hotel. He had a man crush on Rudolph Valentino.
Who was long dead.
Who doesn't?
In honor of Rudolph Valentino. Even has a picture of himself taken dressed as Valentino. So I'm not saying that the All-Star Cafe is not a haunted place because I've heard from other people, credible sources, that things did happen there when it was open in the 1990s. But Max Fisher was a showman. And so he was trying to bring people in. So he was attaching celebrities to these places.
Mm-hmm.
He saw a shadow. Oh, it's Valentino.
It's William Frowley.
Someone says they saw a ghostly blonde in the bathroom. Oh, it's Marilyn Monroe.
It's Valentino in a
wig.
wig.
One step further and say Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio had their honeymoon there. No, they didn't. read the books. I mean, they got married in San Francisco. They spent their literal honeymoon night just outside of San Francisco. Then they disappeared for a while. It wasn't at the Hollywood
became
Roosevelt
ghosts.
because that's where. 20th Century Fox had Marilyn Monroe signed a contract. They didn't want her marrying Joe DiMaggio. When she disappeared to marry him, guess what? She was suspended. And that's why she disappeared after the marriage. She went into hiding. So the Fox sent spies everywhere, and there were definitely spies sent to the Hollywood Roosevelt. So they would have found her if she were there. What happened was she was in Palm Springs.
Much better.
For a few days,
Yeah.
and then DiMaggio flew back to go back to work. He flew back to New York, and she kind of sauntered in to Hollywood and negotiated a meeting with was it Selznick?
Mayor?
Who's the Fox guy? Forgot his name.
Fisher?
No, it wasn't Zucker. Zucker's. I'm getting my vocals confused here. But anyway, she went back and got unsuspended and all was forgiven. But, these are how these urban legends start, and they just get repeated over and over again until people literally believe that they're fact.
Yeah.
And there have been whole books written about, and maps. Creepy LA has a map. Here's where Valentino's ghosts are.
Here's the direct route of the horse.
And,
map to the
and so then
Valentino
you get
ghost.
people seeing these maps and go, I've got this new paranormal theory. Valentino's just going through the same cycles he did when he was alive. He's going to the Paramount, then he has to go back over to the Alexandria, then he goes for tea at the Hollywood Roosevelt.
He's got to get traffic.
Well, how come we don't see him at the unglamorous places?
Most of that stuff is completely made up. Here's another example of Valentino. The Alexandria Hotel. We all have heard about the Valentino suite, right? Mm-hmm. And you go on Instagram and get your Insta paranormal history there, and look up Elvira or Black Dahlia 666, or whoever is the online personality at the moment, and they'll say, I just did a photo shoot. The ghost of Valentino was supposedly seen here, and he wears a white suit, and he goes saunters down the hall. Wrong.
He never sauntered.
Here's the fact. It's in the book, but I'm going to spoil it. This part. Valentino did in fact stay at the Alexandria. When he first came to LA from San Francisco in 1917, he had no place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
He was friends with an actor that was working in the film industry named Norman Carey. Norman says, hey, you could stay with me for a while. I'll introduce you to Sam Goldwyn and Jack Warner and all these other people that are all living at the Alexandria Hotel at that time. So they did. He made his rounds. But then Norman Carey decided World War I was breaking out, so Norman Carey decided to do something for the troops, but he was going to Canada. It wasn't to avoid, I don't think, but
I just got to cross the border real quick.
It did raise questions. So I'm supporting the war efforts. I'm going to Canada. So he checks out of Alexandria and he goes to Canada. And so Valentino, who was broke, had to have another place. So he went and he was investing all his money in clothes at that point. So he had nice clothes, real
Solid
flashy
investment.
looking guy, but he was living in a dive
Yeah.
a few blocks away from the Alexandria. So he did stay there. All those records are gone, if they even existed at all, since he was a guest of a paying
Mm-hmm.
person there. In the 30s, all those records got lost when the Alexandria went bankrupt and they auctioned everything off.
There's on records.
Yeah, they just were
$4.
They were just trashing
Oh,
things.
boy.
They were going through everything. They found like thousands of dollars in an envelope that D.W. Griffith had stored with them and forgot all about it.
It's hard to move that furniture, though, from what I hear.
They were just cleaning house, and they threw out everything. So what ended up happening is the Alexandria was almost torn down in the 60s. A couple of actresses convinced the owner to try to do something with the hotel to reignite it, the popularity. So he decided
Burn
to
it down.
and they gave it a complete Victorian look. But then they started naming suites in honor of people that had stayed there. So they took this one suite upstairs and they named it the Valentino Suite. They just happened to pick a suite that is haunted. Okay? Thus, the story of Valentino's ghost haunting that room. And I can vouch for it. It is haunted. I shot there, and it was one of my very first shoots for this book. And it went late at night, and it was dark. And the leasing agent for the Alexandria came up after work, and so he was annoying, so I put him in the back room with a little spotlight, trying to do this little hallway into the front room where I had the model posed, right? And so we're trying to get this shot. He starts saying back there, he says, man, I'm getting kind of creepy back here. Things are kind of spooky. It's getting cold. And can you hurry up and get the shot? And I look back at him and I'm rolling my eyes and I go, I'll get the shot. I'm working on it. Don't worry. Just hang back there a little bit more. And a couple of minutes passed by and suddenly this door in that room where the leasing agent was just slams so loud and so hard that all the glass started moving. The leasing agent screams. And he's holding this spotlight beam, and that beam is like all over the wall.
The beam's screaming.
And everyone, even we all jumped. I'll admit, I jumped too. We all jumped at that because that was like so unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because that door that slammed was a door we thought was permanently sealed open. We tried to close it earlier in that day. But, you got to understand the Valentino Suite hasn't been touched since 1970. So everything looks like 19-teens, which fools everybody. That's all 70s Victorian recreation stuff. But the tiles in this little no-window bathroom were warped, and that door was open right in the middle of those tiles. So when we tried we thought we were going to break the door. It was just sealed shut due to the warped floors of the tile. So we didn't mess with it. We're just saying, we'll shoot around it.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's the door that slammed shut.
Oh.
And that picture is on the wall.
Oh, that one.
I should point out,
Yeah.
these are a couple of pictures.
Both
from
his.
my photo shoots. Picture on the left, that was taken in the Valentino suite, and if you see the door closed, that's the door that it slammed shut.
I wouldn't have stood near
So
it.
we shot that photo
I think I could open
obviously after the door slammed, but I had to calm everyone down and say, guys, it's okay if it's a ghost. Chances are this is the only thing that's going to happen. It just doesn't happen. But if something does happen, we will stop and look into it. And sure enough, but we really got to get the shot.
I know everyone's scared, but
And I'm not paying overtime.
There's a great picture of in the book of one of the models, and she's dressed all in red with the red wallpaper from the Alexandria suite, and she looks frightened. She is. That was that was the picture I was trying to take when the door slammed, and she was just like,
good, use that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an ordeal, and it had me convinced. Now, here's let me go back into an earlier rabbit hole. When I first looked at that place with the leasing agent, I said, "What's the ghost stories?" He said, "Oh, well, one of Valentino's wives, after hearing that Valentino committed suicide, she committed suicide." And of course, I knew that was nuts.
Mm-hmm.
He was married twice, both lived to be perfectly old wives. No one committed suicide. No wives committed suicide because of Valentino.
Career suicide.
At least not Valentino's wives.
Yeah.
And second of all, he said that a still photographer had been there a few weeks ago, and a door slammed on him. And I went, "Oh yeah, what door?" And he showed it, and it was a door in the hallway. And there was a cross breeze going through there, so I went, not paranormal. Not paranormal, it was just a cross breeze, got that solved.
Yeah.
Door slammed on me.
Cross breezes don't exist.
Maybe, there was something to that other claim. Maybe, other people have had that experience. So, I'm not nearly as skeptical as I used to be because I tend to err on the side of being too skeptical. I prefer to err that way. I'd rather show me and I'll believe kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And but I will admit that I've had to reevaluate things a lot more and open up my philosophy about haunted places, ghosts, the existence of ghosts. I firmly believe that they do exist. But it took this project to really convince me over 100%, So I always say I'm a reluctant believer. It's true, because I do like to play both sides of the aisle and test people's beliefs. I will tell you, they do exist. And as much as I wish they didn't, because it's much easier to side with the non-believers and because they sound so scientific.
Yeah.
They sound so logical.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't be that logical. Why can't I be that way? Why am I wired to believe this? And it's because there's something in their logic that is wrong, no matter how sound it is. And I have theories as to what's wrong with their logic. I think they tend to whitewash everything.
Mm-hmm.
And try to make broad generalizations to dismiss the paranormal. That's a big mistake. It's a big mistake to make broad generalizations to prove that, or to argue that the paranormal exists. You have to take, case by case and look into it. But I think that's one thing. But the one thing I discovered, I did take a ghost photo and I showed it around to different people, including non-believers. And
I've seen it. Jealous.
The best I can get is, "You're a liar. That's a fake. You're a liar." And I went, "That's your best explanation?" And I'm saying, okay, well, lesson learned is that people will believe what they want to believe based on their system of beliefs. And while the non-believers love to throw that like a custard pie in the face of believers, like, you just want to believe what you want to believe. They're guilty of the same thing. They're guilty of the same thing. So that's what I learned. And I was like, wow, this person who told me that I was a liar also happens to be an atheist, doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in any of this. So obviously he's not going to believe in ghosts. Now, I'm not a big believer in God. I'm not a big believer in a lot of the stuff that are attached to paranormal. I'm still kind of skeptical, and show me a demon and I'll believe in it. But until I see one, I don't believe in them.
Oh, here he is.
Then I met them.
We're not demons.
That's harsh.
Yeah.
We're cherubs.
Yeah, handsome cherubs.
Cherubs from hell.
I called them the Chad and Jeremy of podcasting, or maybe is it Peter and Gordon?
No, you know Peter and Gordon.
Yeah, I love Daniel's '60s look.
He refuses to.
It happens. I'm not trying for it.
He watches one episode of the Brady Bunch. He's like, that's what I want to look like.
I can get used to this.
By the way, I don't know if you know their background, but they're both librarians, correct?
I went to library school. I'm not a librarian yet, but we're both in the library services area.
Yeah.
He's with the Haunted Brand library, right?
And you're just
That guy investigated.
That guy investigated it.
Library.
We went around. I followed him as he asked questions in the dark rooms. I'm like, don't conjure anything. Don't conjure anything.
Well, come on over here and introduce yourself
Please.
while you're here. We just met. I met several of his folks. He's actually investigated this space too. He investigates everything.
Pretty well.
He's investigating me after this.
You're being indicted.
So what's your name?
So my name's Kevin, and I'm with Ghostwatch Paranormal here in Los Angeles.
That's right. Let me tell you about. I've met Johnny Matouk, and he's also with the group, and Paul Roberts. He's with the group, and they're the great thing about Johnny, and I love this guy, and here's why. I've only met him once, and it was actually here where we met in person. But he works at Warner Brothers, and I used to work at Warner Brothers in production. And I was a script PA in 1999, and I was going to, I think it was stage 28. It was the oldest sound stage on Warner Brothers, and it was Halloween night. I don't believe anything. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, how can this be? I don't believe anything happens on Halloween night. So I get called in early to drop off scripts. So it's like the sun hasn't even set. It's setting, but I've made about 500 scripts, and I go onto this dark sound stage to drop off scripts. And as I go up this little rickety wooden ladder, I'm standing overlooking the stage. It was a show called Odd Man Out. Terrible show. Lasted less than one season. Marky Post. You'll edit that terrible.
Yeah, I'll cut it out. Yeah, it's gonna be the only thing we release.
We're very pro odd.
No, it did terribly in the ratings. But anyway, I'm up there, and I hear a woman talking suddenly, and I can't quite make out what she's saying, but she is talking. And back then we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have all this electronic stuff. I had a pager, So I just looked at my pager and go, okay, I'll give it 15, 20 minutes. If it's a radio left on, they'll have to break for a station ID. There's never such thing as dead air.
Yeah.
If it's a radio, and so I'll just listen. So I listened. There were lots of dead air, no radio breaks. It was a woman just reciting something, and it just seemed like it kept drifting and drifting. And on top of all of that, the overhead lights, the work lights at these old sound stages, I've been doing this for years, so I knew how they worked. You flip on the switches, they flicker a little bit, they get real dim, and then as they warm up, they get brighter.
Mm-hmm.
These were not catching on full. They were just flickering like crazy. Half the lights never came on. So you had this kind of poltergeist Steven Spielberg produced
Okay, guys, I
going on.
get
You
it.
have this woman reciting, and it's Halloween night, and I'm like going, I'm being punked. Someone is punking me. And I'm like going, but who knows me to do this? And who would go through these steps to just freak out this little low-level employee, just trying to get through the night, getting scripts out to everybody. And so I stayed there for 20 minutes, and then finally I was like, I got to get back to work. I still have 50 scripts I have to drop in the middle of the stage before I can leave. So I decided I'm going to sneak down the steps one by one, and see if I can surprise or keep the ghost going. Because I knew enough about ghost lore that, once you get down to the bottom of the steps, the voice will disappear, I've seen a million movies and know how it happens.
Just got to get back in sunlight.
Right?
Just got to get back in sunlight.
So I'm like really sneaking down as quiet as I can. When I get halfway down the stairs, I'm still hearing her. I'm going, okay, good. Sneak down. By the time I get to the bottom of the stairs, the voice is gone. So I'm like going, Well, I told myself while I was upstairs that I would still do a walkthrough and see if I can find any. It's still a dark set. The lights are still flashing crazy.
Yeah.
So I drop off the scripts in the middle of the sound stage. I walk around. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. No TVs, no radios, no intercoms are turned on. It's just me. So I start walking across the stage to the door that I had come in. That's when I start hearing the clop, clop, clop of heels and swish, swish, swish of fabric like a dress, behind me. And it was about 20 feet away. And I go, okay, I'm hearing this. And it's not in sync with my own footsteps, okay? It's a little off. So I decided I would just stop and turn real quick and go, you're busted. So I stop and turn. No one's there. But what kind of creeped me out at the moment is that the footsteps didn't stop exactly when I stopped. It was like they're following me, and then I stopped suddenly. I made a very conscious, very precise
I'm
stop.
stopping.
It was like a little stutter before it stopped. So I turn around, didn't see anybody. I started walking. I get about 3-4 steps. I don't hear anything, and then suddenly I hear the clomp, 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 and the swish, swish, swish again. Only this time it was closer. Well, this time it was about 10 feet behind me, and I was in a very wide open space. So I had reached a point closer to the door where there was no way anyone could dart and hide behind a wall or a prop or anything.
Yeah.
Turn around a second time. Again, the same pattern. It didn't stop when I stopped, but it did stop, and there was no one there. So I went hurriedly out the door this time, and I flicked off the lights. I said something kind of smart aleck to whatever.
Yeah.
You have your fun. You have your fun. I'm going
Great, I'm
now.
crying now.
Ha ha ha. Happy Halloween. And I go out, and I'm like shaking, so I'm like smoking a couple of cigarettes outside. I had moved my golf cart so I could look at both entrances of the soundstage, just expecting some wise guy to come out. No one ever came out, right? So I did go back and finish my work. I tried to tell my supervisor, who was a good friend of mine. No one believed me. No one believed me when I said, Halloween night? Really? I talked to another security guard that, sometimes we scare each other because he'll come in to make his rounds and I'm in there and we almost collide. I go, hey, ghost stories? And I tell him what happened and he's like, on Halloween night? Are you kidding me? And I couldn't get anyone to fess up. Couldn't get anyone to fess up on anything. The most I could ever hear is from one security guard told me, well, on some nights, some of the overnight workers, the cleaners, some of them will quit for no reason at all while in Jack Warner's old office. Aside from that, no stories of ghosts. So I must have worked like 3-4 different shows on that lot before I, moved into another career mode. And I wrote about it once. I finally, on my Bizarre Los Angeles Facebook page, I finally decided to put it down and publish it for Halloween season a few years ago. within 24 hours, one of Warner Brothers' top executives started following me. And I was like, oh, am I in trouble? Did I say something wrong? Then I run into Johnny, okay? And Johnny works at Warner Brothers. And Johnny's a paranormal investigator. He knew exactly what soundstage I was talking about. He goes, oh, that sounds like soundstage 28. I went, I'll have to look it up because I can't remember. It's been a while. And I did. Sure enough, he was right that I was right. He knew the ghost stories on all of those places. People have finally come forward and started talking about Warner Brothers studio being haunted, whereas before it was a well-kept secret. When Johnny told me this, I mean, I was so excited. You know, it was like finally someone else experienced, but others have experienced that woman ghost.
Yeah.
On that sound stage that's reciting something. There's supposed to be a man haunting there too, according to Johnny. But so that's how I got to know these people here, and we're supposed to be doing something here, so, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted you guys to meet him, and
Thank you.
now, did
Pleasure
you ever
meeting you.
find that this place was haunted? Do you think this place has paranormal activity?
Was it last November, I think, we did a investigation here. And I actually didn't make this when I was already out of town for my sister's college graduation. But I did a lot of the audio review from our group. And I remember Johnny was here. And it was, I believe, Johnny, Olivia, and Paul. And going through the audio, they were asking questions. And we did pick up, listening to the audio, you can hear people's distance from the microphone.
Okay.
And we picked up a female voice saying Johnny's name into the microphone on the recorder. When you listen to it long enough, you can tell, kind of who's where in the room.
Yeah.
And then for this to be directly into the microphone, it was just, Johnny.
I don't even feel comfortable in this room now. Thank you.
And I think that I didn't know this part wasn't here yet. It was over in that side.
Inside.
On
Yeah,
that
fine.
side. Yeah, well,
Wasn't it connected to the? We found out it's connected to the witch that came from Paramount Studios.
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
Johnny's witch.
That's what they call it.
so yeah, I think that the predominant theory about why this is haunted may have to do with artifacts that have been brought in, okay? There may have been something that happened, but the strip is like from the, 1950s. You are seeing more mid-century modern ghosts popping up in social lore, and I've even come across now ghosts from the 80s are coming in.
Bitches.
So, exactly. Bitching.
I smell hairspray somewhere.
That was one gnarly house.
So when we were doing the remodel, what we noticed when we ran into pipes inside the walls is that's an easy way to age the building, and the pipes are easily from the 40s. So this
Okay.
building alone was just kept on.
So the pipes are from the 40s.
Yeah, so this building
Haunted
alone
pipes.
was in
Yeah.
like
The overhead
maybe even
pipes.
30s. So you can tell, I was like, oh, I thought this building was from the 80s, but it turns out that, they were building buildings on Magnolia for a long, long time. But predominantly, Burbank was up and running in the 50s was its main height.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it was such a studio town, much more so than now.
It was,
But,
before that, it was the Army base and what was that called? Where all the planes, it was like,
Not
so all
like the
those little houses
central-
on Chandler were for the soldiers to live in.
Oh, right.
Oh really?
The barracks?
Yeah, it was a hangar base.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was more like 30s and 20s and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So that's why there's so many tiny houses. 'Cause it was lodging for the soldiers.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Write that down.
You gotta come back here and say it all into the microphone now, because it's a bunch of me going, yeah.
Didn't mean anything before.
Lockheed, I think. It was.
Lockheed, I think it was, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely am familiar with the. They had like a base during World War II where the studio technicians actually created a fake front overhead, like a tarp,
Yeah.
so that when planes flew over, they couldn't see that it was a factory underneath.
That's
It just looked like
Tarp
this
Town.
rural road, and topography and terrain, but it was just it was a tarp, and they got the studio set directors and studio personnel at Warner Brothers and Universal to create that for them. You can find pictures. I wrote about that on Bizarre Los Angeles years ago, but you can find those photos, those aerial photos of how these top secret, warplane machine factories were working. But what it looked like from above, because they didn't want to get bombed or get targeted for, in the case of a Japanese or German assault by air. So yeah.
Briefly before we wrap up, can we talk about haunted spots in Burbank other than the Mystic Museum? Because all I could think of is the Coral Cafe.
It was fake,
What?
debunked.
Really?
Coral Cafe? You mean I can go back there?
Then how come I'm scared to go to the bathroom?
The video that's online was debunked by a friend of mine when I showed her. She's like, "Nope, that's fake." I was like, "What?" And that's kind of like where the main rumor started.
Uh-huh.
You could see the person's reflection in the shiny wallpaper on the side.
Oh.
Like, nope, see, there's actually a person's wallpaper. They forgot to get rid of that.
Eric is debunking our Coral Cafe.
Yeah. What you can't hear is that he confirmed it, and we're right.
The video itself was debunked.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fair. Everyone to the Coral Cafe.
Your treat.
Have you heard about it?
I've heard about it. I've never been to it.
It's 24 hours, so it's really
Yeah.
hard to get in there and do an investigation.
Yeah, you're right.
But easy to get in and eat. This show has been brought to you by Coral Cafe.
So yeah, I told my Warner Brothers story, so that was my.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and again, Johnny knows the ins and outs. I mean, he knows even some of them sound quite wild, some not so wild. I was shocked to hear. One of the shows I worked on was in the original Writers Building, but we just had the bottom floor. But Johnny told me all about the top floor being haunted, and people hearing the sound of a typewriter late at night going, and not a modern typewriter,
Yeah.
not that there's such thing as those anymore, but, the tap,
Good
tap,
sound
tap of an
effects.
old Underwood. And there's something else that people have seen up there or have heard as well.
Quite a few around the church area right there in the middle and stuff like that. People see a shadow of, I believe it's I can't remember the guy.
The shadow around the church.
Yeah, that crosses
I love that book.
through there, down by the garden and stuff like that.
And how does the studio feel about their ghost stories now?
He's gonna wrap it.
No, actually, was it last year, I believe? They actually invited our group there because when they were shooting Conjuring 2, Johnny actually got to talking to some of the people there, and our group got invited to investigate the set of the Conjuring 2.
Oh, okay.
Warner Brothers Law while it was in.
Yeah.
So after doing that, we kind of got some ideas to the tours department, and they actually brought us in to help with their haunted Halloween tours last year. Or I'm sorry, not last year, it'd be the year before. And so they were pretty open to that. They set us up kind of in front of stage 4 where they shot it, and as they brought the trams by, we would let them hear some of our evidence that we caught and stuff like that. So they were pretty open to it.
That's good. I mean,
Can only help them.
yes. I
And
mean,
once-
well, Universal, every studio is supposed to be haunted. I mean, Raleigh Studio, Paramount, of course, Universal, loves to promote all of that. But the Disney studio doesn't really talk about it. Nor does, but the Disney studio is still fairly new compared to
Until
these
they
other studios.
buy a ghost franchise, and then they'll say, "Yeah, we're haunted."
Well, even
Exactly.
Disneyland, I worked on a production down there, and we was going through security, and I had on my Ghost Watch jacket, and the security guy was like, "Oh, so you're here for the ghost, huh?"
That guy was
Disney-
never heard from again.
Disneyland's supposed to be haunted for sure. So there's been tons of stories and a few books written about that, and some stories are more credible than others. It'd be interesting to, I haven't latched on. It takes a lot of time to take on a case and really research it to its roots. There's a story about a kid that died in the haunted mansion. Well, I'd have to dig deep to find out if that's true or not, or whether a dying child's last wish was to go on the Caribbean Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and that his ghost still haunts. You'd have to get more details and be able to research that to run them down. But I was able to catch a lot of stuff. Just you'd be surprised. It does take a lot of work, and quite frankly, the ghost hunting can be kind of boring. Sometimes historic research can be boring, but I actually got more of a charge coming up with new information that just forgotten stories are my favorite, So if you're reading, I come across a story about a wild bull that got loose on the second floor of the Alexandria Hotel and started chasing around a woman in a red dress. That is great. Why hasn't anyone discussed this story before? Why are we talking about other stupid stuff that isn't true, like Valentino dancing riding down from horseback to a speakeasy, which makes no logical sense, to dance the tango, as if anyone would want to dance with someone that smelled like a horse.
It takes two to smell like a horse.
All of these things sound great, but when you hold them under the light of scrutiny, and once you realize that, hey, Valentino didn't own any horses when he lived in Holden Hills.
Ghost horse.
Yeah, he didn't own horses until Falcon Lair, and that's quite a jaunt to ride from horseback from Falcon Lair to Hollywood to drink in a speakeasy. That's just a recipe.
If you're as drunk as he was.
No one's going to ask any questions about the horse.
The only reason why anyone would do that was to get attention, and if there's no news source to back it up, then it was a really bad publicity stunt. So stuff doesn't make sense, and that's why I always kind of encourage. It's okay to believe in ghosts. It's okay not to believe in ghosts. But the ghost legends, I ask everyone, check and double check, question where they came from, because chances are a lot of them are like Greek myths. Back in the days of Greece, fire. How do we explain that? Well, obviously a god came down. How did Mary Jane get knocked up? Well, it must have been a god. A peacock. And so they're just pulling this stuff and trying to make it fit in order to create an identity or an origin for the ghost. I'll give you one example, and I'll leave it at that. It's not in this book. It'll be later in volume 2. One of my pet peeves is the Bella Maggiore Inn.
Where's that?
In Ventura County.
Okay.
The ghost story, and I'll air my frustration here in a bit. I'm very frustrated with the Queen Mary ghost stories too. but the Bella Maggiore Inn, let me just tell you, the story is that a prostitute in 1947 named Sylvia Michael committed suicide in either room 15 or room 17 by hanging herself in the closet, and that she did so after her boyfriend, who was a sailor, broke up with her and went back to his wife. And this has been on America's Most Haunted. It's been on Haunted Hotels, the Authentic Entertainment. It's been written about in several books. The Ventura Star has even printed in past years a artistic rendering of the woman. Okay, so we have an idea of what she looked like. It was all made up in the 1980s. The room that Sylvia supposedly died in was the shared men's restroom back when it was a hotel.
That's not possible.
Sylvia originally was, I know who made it. I actually traced the man who told me I made that story up, okay? He had some employees, co-workers working with him that knew something was wrong and haunting the hotel. So he came up with the story of a woman named Sylvia. Only his version of the story was that she was a mail-order bride that got rejected by her husband, so she kills herself. Then a certain well-known Ventura ghost hunter / lecturer / author, He comes in, holds a seance, and they come up with this whole convoluted story via seance of Sylvia Michaels, prostitute from Atlantic City, and came in and got knocked up, was hoping to marry this sailor, and the sailor abandons her. Then after that caught wind, because he started telling the story on his tours and everywhere. Anyone who'd listened to him, he got on the air, he told stories. Then the story changed, where maybe she didn't commit suicide. Maybe she was murdered by a petty officer. Okay? Guess who made that up? The same guy that made up the story about the Sylvia Michaels. He couldn't even stay true to his own story. He had to change it up to keep it fresh, I guess. I don't know. So I'm like going, what is this? I mean, this makes no sense why this story would be there. But when I started talking to people that had paranormal experiences in that room, you know what they're saying? And it makes a lot more sense. They're saying that while they're there, a bar of soap would levitate and fly across the room, or a hand towel would suddenly yank and fall to the floor. All of these are bathroom-related incidents, only to find out later that that's exactly what that room used to be, a shared bathroom. So I'll write to occasional paranormal investigators because you know what a lot of them are doing? It's so silly. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail after this.
Let me know if you want me to cut this out.
But they'll bring flower offerings to Sylvia. And go, Sylvia, here are flowers. Now come talk to us. And I'm like going, guys, buy my book. Follow me.
Buy me
and
flowers.
You'll save tons of money on roses. Because you're not hunting ghosts, you're hunting snipes at this point. Now, is there a woman haunting there? Yes, I believe so. I believe that, but I know the history of the Bella Maggiore Inn as best as anyone does. No one knows the total history because it was always under the radar map. But I can explain why that building is built so funky because I know what happened. And that's what I keep encouraging paranormal investigators or anyone that loves ghosts lore or whatever, is just don't always accept a story unless you question it and find out where the roots of it came from. Find out the basic questions, the whys, the hows, the what, the what, you know, and that's the main thing that I find wrong with the majority of paranormal investigators out there, is that they take things for granted because, oh, someone said it. Oh, because Ghost Adventure said it. It must be true. Well, it's not usually true. That's why researchers can sometimes make good paranormal investigators. I try. I'm not the best, you know, and I don't pretend to be the best. I do try to use the very best skills that I know how, critical thinking skills, logic, and whatnot. But a researcher is a great asset to any paranormal team, and it's more valuable than a ghost box.
That's always my favorite part.
Than an Ovilus or some of these little silly instruments that are used for finding ghosts that people swear by, you know. And I have issues with those because the information that I get does not convince me as a historian that what they're finding is anything related to history or the nature of the hauntings there. And because you give a ghost hunter a ghost box, put him into the Sylvia Michaels room at the Bella Maggiore, and he'll have a great conversation with Sylvia Michaels, the ghost that doesn't exist, at least by that name, you know. Now, I will say that I did stay in that room during my photo shoot there. And things did happen in that room that were very weird, especially on my last night, you know. But I can't say it's Sylvia. If anything, you know what it sounded like? A male, which would make sense, again, historically, because that room was the male public restroom, shared restroom for that building. And so the Sylvia Michael thing took off with a life of its own. You can go on and kind of apply the same rules to Jackie the Ghost Child at the Queen Mary. I can always judge a paranormal investigator by what they say about Jackie. And they don't do the research. They don't realize that they all of them know that Jackie there's no record of a Jackie Turan or Turin.
Can you go back a little bit and explain to people like me who don't know what that is?
Oh, Queen Mary?
No, I know what the Queen Mary is. It's something with water, right?
It's actually legally a building. So when you call it a ship, it's actually incorrect. It's a building.
They're renting office spaces on that net?
You try to put that to sea, and it sinks like a rock. Okay. Queen Mary is famous for a ghost child that apparently is recorded the most and seen the most in the first class swimming pool. Okay? She's also been seen in other parts, but that's primarily what she is. She's supposed to be like an 8 or 9-year-old girl. Some say she's blonde, some say she's got dark hair. She seems to be dressed from either the 30s or 40s from those that have seen her. And the story, there was a psychic, late psychic, Peter James, came on board in 1989 and in 1990, and he gave her that name, Jackie Torrin. And he built this whole case that he was basically the ghost's godfather. We are very close, Jackie and I, so quote Peter. And he'd bring these whole groups in, and he'd call Jackie, come to the light, come live in love, come forward, Jackie. And occasionally she would come by and say something, okay? And then he got a lot of fame for that and a lot of acclaim for it, okay? Then he was on Sightings, the TV show in the 80s and 90s. And then he came back to the Queen Mary after Sightings ended. He got involved with a group that was sketchy at best. They held ghost expeditions from the Vogue Theater. And then Peter James came back, and he was in very ill health, and he was trying to get something going again. So he brought back a lot of the stories that he had told back in the 80s, and then health caught the best of him, and he passed away in 2007. And people that have known him and like him love him. And quite frankly, I've read many of his works, and I agree almost 90% with his paranormal theories. He's not a guy to just dismiss as, the worst. However, he was a showman, and he was around in the Disney thing, and he never stayed true to any story. It was always embellished, and it got even more embellished as he got older and his health started to fail. So much of his stuff is not true, and even though he still has a cult following, even they, I think, look the other way. They ignore some of the other things that were going on with him and some of the things that he was saying that was outrageously false. So the Queen Mary has distanced themselves from Peter James in recent years, and so they took down the Peter James videotape tours and stuff. But let's get back to Jackie. He gave Jackie the name in 1990. He was part of the Disney team. He wasn't an employee of Disney. He was an independent contractor, so he could keep his mustache, and he didn't have to wear mouse ears or dress in a costume or anything like that. He could be Peter James, but he was carrying around a lot of the same rhetoric that was going around back then about murders this, murder that. Now, in 1983, the Queen Mary, thanks to an author for the Long Beach paper, they did a soft opening for the ghost legends by saying that 2 women drowned in a swimming pool. By the time Peter James came on, 1989, he had named one of the females that had drowned as Jackie Torrin and put it in the second-class swimming pool, which no longer exists. He gets the location wrong because he says it was in the theater, the Royal Theater or whatever it was down there, that was the site of the second-class swimming pool. It was actually the site of the second-class swimming pool's changing room. It wasn't quite the pool where she drowned. But then again, you know, if you believe Peter James, you have to believe in all the other inappropriate, not inappropriate, but incorrect information that comes along with it. Okay, so Peter James then identified a second female. I forgot the name of her, but he ended up positively identifying with a name 2 females that drowned in the pool in 1990. All right, well, in 1990, Disney abandoned their lease and moved out. The Queen Mary closed down for a while. Then another company assumed the lease. And it's a guy named Previchil. I always get his name mixed up, but he's a very colorful character. You either love him or you hate him in Long Beach. But he came on board, and what he did is he finally got the official records and put the names of the people that literally they have records of as dying on the walls of the Queen Mary. And they finally said no people drowned in the pools.
Hard stance.
No records of it. And in doing my research, it seems likely that is true because any kind of turbulence while that liner was overseas, they immediately shut down the pools. They would not let you swim under any kind of heavy turbulence while at sea. So they were very mindful not to have drownings there, okay? They were very tight with that policy. Okay, fast forward to early 2000s when Peter James came back after being away for so long. He started retelling the same stories, but none of his stories corroborated with any of the information of deaths on the plaques, okay? None of them. And so you either believed him or you didn't believe. And so it became a choice. But he still kept insisting that child's name is Jackie. Now, I'm friends with the current paranormal investigator that runs the independent tours there, and I asked him about that. And he claims that it is Jackie, okay? And I said, well, I could be wrong. Maybe it is Jackie. But I said, why don't someone go to the first-class swimming pool that has access and just call out Myrtle for about 5 days at all hours of the night? Myrtle, come forward. Myrtle. Myrtle, are you there? Myrtle. And I bet you, I'd be willing to wager that child will come through and talk. It's not responding to Jackie, the name Jackie, in my opinion. It's just coming through when it can come through. So you can call it any name. So, but, it's hard to get people to run that test. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a valid one because there is no one named Jackie that died there. And let's go back even further in my research. Guess when the ghost story started with children? It started in the 1950s. So Peter James didn't invent this ghost child. He was fortunate to be the first one to record it and document it. But staff and passengers had seen ghost children on that ship as early as, I want to say 1956. It could go back earlier than that. But 1956, 1957 is the earliest year I could trace it back to. Okay. Bearing that in mind, the ghost was not centered. The children were not centered in the first-class swimming pool. They were all over the ship, especially the upper decks. They'd be playing in empty cabins, and they'd be making a ruckus. They'd enter the empty a steward would enter the empty cabin. No one was there. Even when the Queen Mary was being refitted as a tourist attraction in 1969 and 68, there were stories reported in the London paper as well as the Long Beach talking about little children, the sound of little children playing and running around the M decks and all the other decks, where the cabins were, okay? There's a story in the late 50s of one of the cooks went into a meat locker way below in the lower decks, and he was practicing the trumpet alone. And he got spooked when he heard a little girl start crying down there. So the little girl ghost or little children ghost, they were all over the ship. So why aren't they all over the ship now and in the first class swimming pool? Well, there is a good reason. There's a pretty good guess there. And that's because when the ship was active, up until around 1969, those engines were running. And there was lots of energy being pumped throughout that whole ship. That ship was energized. When they cut those engines and they cut that master clock and they turned this ship into dead silence, there was no energy for ghosts to feed from, okay, so to speak. That's one of the other theories, is that ghosts feed off of energy. And so when you cut out all the energy from the place, it gets still, and there's no place for ghosts to really draw energy. That also explains why, if you've ever stayed in the cabins, why you can hear everything going on next door. I mean, you can hear everything. You can hear belching. You can hear. I was staying at one time, and I felt like I had just watched Oprah. I heard every word of that show bleeding in through the walls. Well, it's because the engines masked the sound from next door, so they didn't have to make fully insulated walls. Okay, here's my theory, and it's a pretty good theory. The first class swimming pool, the ceiling, is crystal quartz. Crystal quartz is supposed to be a conduit for energy. And that's why that is the hot spot for the paranormal activity. It's not because there's this hole, ozone hole or dimensional hole where ghosts can come in and come out. My experience in looking over years and years of research, it seems to be the same ghosts, okay, over and over again. It's not this multitude of coming and going. So with that in mind, I need to wrap up, but I think it's the crystal quartz that is what is keeping that area active, and as opposed to other parts of the ship.
Crystal quartz.
Crystal quartz.
Let's go
If
right
there's
now.
one thing you take from this, it's crystal quartz.